Serafina Voss had always been easy to overlook. She was not the loudest voice in any room, not the strongest fighter in any circle, and not the daughter of anyone important. She was simply the quiet girl at the edge of Cresthaven Pack, who noticed everything and said very little. People walked past her at pack gatherings the way they walked past old furniture, without ever really seeing it. She had made peace with that, mostly. The one thing she had never made peace with was losing Caden Thorne. He had been her fated mate. She had known it the moment she turned 17 and caught his scent near the northern tree line, pine and rain and something deeper that she could not name, but her whole body recognized. The mate bond was not a soft feeling. It was a certainty, the way sunrise is certain. It did not ask permission. It simply was. And for 1 year, it had been the most real thing in her life. Caden had felt it too. She had seen it in the way he looked for her in crowded rooms, in the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, in the way he once stood in the rain for 20 minutes, because she had left her jacket at the training field, and he did not want her to be cold. He was, in those moments, not the feared alpha of Cresthaven, but simply a man who could not help caring about her. Then his father died. The pack leadership transferred to his hands overnight, and with it came the weight of something Serafina had not known existed. A secret agreement between the Thorne family and the Hargrove family of Iron Ridge Pack. A marriage arrangement, a merger of two territories, a political solution wearing the shape of a wedding. She remembered the night he told her. They were standing at the edge of the forest, and the moon was full and cold overhead. He looked at her the way someone looks at a door they are about to close forever. "I can't follow a bond when the pack needs a leader," he said. His voice was steady. She hated him for that. "That is not the real reason," she said quietly. He did not argue. That was the worst part. He did not argue because she was right, and they both knew it. He was afraid, not of the bond, but of what choosing her would cost him. The merger, the alliance, the doubled territory, the future he had been groomed to build. Serafina was not part of that future. She was not rich enough, not powerful enough, not connected enough. She was just the girl his heart had chosen, and his heart, it turned out, did not get a vote. He spoke the rejection words. She felt the bond break the way you feel a bone break, a sharp, sickening snap, and then a spreading cold. She did not cry. She looked at his face one last time, as though memorizing it. Then she turned around and walked into the forest, and she did not come back. No. 3 years is a long time to become someone new. Serafina did not plan the person she became. She did not set out to find power or title or authority. She walked out of that forest with nothing but the clothes on her back and the broken place in her chest where the bond used to live, and she kept walking until she reached the outer boundary of Cresthaven territory, and then she kept walking after that. She found her way to the Sacred Covenant by accident, or perhaps by something older than accident. The Covenant was a hidden community of wolves who lived outside the pack system, scholars, healers, and keepers of old laws that most packs had forgotten. Elder Marin found her sleeping beneath a pine tree 2 days after her rejection, half frozen, and brought her inside without a single question. "You can stay," the old woman said simply, handing her a bowl of hot broth. "As long as you need." Serafina stayed. At first because she had nowhere else to go, then because she discovered something in the Covenant's sanctuary that she had never been given space to discover before, herself. Her gift had always been there. She could feel the emotional truth beneath a person's words, the way other wolves could smell fear or anger. She had never thought of it as special. In Cresthaven, where strength was measured in how fast you could run and how hard you could fight, a talent for understanding people had seemed like a very gentle, very useless thing. In the Covenant, it was everything. Elder Marin trained her patiently through all 4 seasons. She taught Serafina how to listen, not just with her ears, but with everything she was. She taught her the old laws, the sacred agreements, the language of the moon goddess that had not been spoken aloud in 200 years. She pushed her until Serafina could read a room full of strangers in seconds, could identify the exact source of a conflict before anyone else had understood there was one, could walk into a conversation pulling apart at its edges and hold it steady with nothing but the right words spoken at the right moment. In her 2nd year, something else happened. During a midnight ceremony under a full moon, as Seraphina stood alone in the Covenant's stone courtyard, with her eyes closed and her hands open at her sides, she felt the moon goddess answer her. It was not a sound or a vision. It was more like being filled with something warm and ancient and sure, the way you might fill an empty cup with water. She did not fully understand what had happened, until Elder Marin found her afterward, and stood very still for a long moment before speaking. The last wolf the goddess touched directly, Marin said slowly, was High Luna Avara, 214 years ago. Seraphina had heard of Avara. Everyone had. She was the wolf who had ended the Great Pack War by standing between two armies and speaking judgment so clearly that both sides put down their weapons. "I am not Avara," Seraphina said. "No," Marin agreed. "You are Seraphina Voss, and the goddess has decided that is enough." The crowning ceremony happened quietly, with no audience but the Covenant elders and the stars overhead. The ancient silver crown, lunar crescents layered over one another, set with moonstones that held their own pale light, was placed on her head by hands that trembled slightly with the weight of what they were doing. Seraphina kept her eyes open. She had spent enough of her life looking at the ground. The letter from the Grand Alpha Summit arrived 6 weeks later. The summit was held every 4 years at a neutral estate on the border between 3 territories. Every Pack Alpha in the northern region was expected to attend. This year, the Boundary Accords, a set of territorial agreements that had been collapsing slowly for a decade, were finally going to be renegotiated, and everyone knew the meetings would be difficult. The Covenant had been invited to send a representative as an impartial overseer. Seraphina read the guest list carefully. Caden Thorne's name was near the top, as she had known it would be. She folded the letter, placed it on the desk, and looked out the window for a long moment. Then she told Elder Marin she would go. "Are you sure?" the old woman asked. "No," Seraphina said honestly, "but I am going anyway." "No." She did not see him the night the delegations arrived. She heard about his arrival from her second, a sharp-eyed young wolf named Petra, who reported it without any particular expression, and then waited. "Thank you," Seraphina said, and turned back to her documents. She felt calmer than she had expected. Or perhaps she was simply very good at not feeling things until she was ready to feel them. She had learned that particular skill in the forest, on the second night after the rejection, when she had understood that if she let herself feel everything at once, she would never get up off the cold ground. The next morning, she walked into the great hall. The room was full. Alphas and their advisors, all arranged around a long set of tables, all talking over one another, with the familiar energy of powerful people who had not yet been asked to share. The noise dropped gradually as she walked toward the high table, not because she commanded silence, but because something in the way she moved made people look up. She was wearing the Covenant's ceremonial silver, high-collared, with white flowers at the cuffs. The crown sat on her dark hair like it had always belonged there. She did not hurry. She did not look around nervously. She walked the length of that hall the way she had learned to walk in the Covenant's courtyard, as though she had already arrived and the room was simply catching up. She found Caden's face in the crowd without meaning to. Her eyes simply went there, the way they always had. He looked exactly like himself, and entirely different at the same time, broader through the shoulders. The careful, watchful expression of a man who had spent 3 years in charge of things. Beside him sat a woman who could only be Isolde Hargrove, precise posture, a composed face, eyes that were already watching Seraphina with quiet recognition. Seraphina held Caden's gaze for a moment, 3 seconds perhaps, long enough to see that he was not prepared for her, not for the crown, not for the presence, not for the fact that the girl he had walked away from had somehow become this. Then she looked away and took her seat and opened her documents and got to work. It was the most satisfying thing she had done in 3 years. The negotiations were painful. Wolves with large territories and large egos do not easily agree to share borders. And by the 3rd morning, the hall had reached the kind of tension that feels like a held breath. 2 alphas were moments away from a serious confrontation when Seraphina stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Something about her standing simply made the room listen. "You came here to build something," she said clearly. "I have been watching you spend 3 days choosing pride over your people. The packs you lead are not in this room. They are at home, hoping you will return with agreements that protect them. Every hour you spend posturing is an hour you take from them." She paused. "I hold judgment authority from the moon goddess herself. I would prefer not to use it, but I will, if this gathering cannot find its own wisdom." The room was very quiet. Then she turned, deliberately, and for reasons she had considered carefully beforehand, to Caden Thorne. "Alpha Thorne, you have the most influence in this room, and the most to gain from a successful accord. What do you propose?" She watched him understand what she was doing. She was not favoring him. She was using the respect the room already held for him as a lever to move the negotiation forward. She was, in a clean and efficient way, doing exactly what he had once done to her, treating someone as a useful instrument in a larger plan. She did not feel guilty about it. She felt, in fact, almost peaceful. He held her gaze for one breath. Then he proposed a solution. It was a good one, fair, specific, and grounded in what each pack actually needed, rather than what each alpha wanted to appear to need. The room shifted. The tension released. The accords moved forward. Seraphina sat back down and made a note in her documents, and did not let herself look at him again for the rest of the session. He found her in the garden that evening. She had expected he might. It was a quiet space behind the estate. Stone paths, old lanterns, the smell of pine from the trees beyond the wall. She was reading over the next day's agenda when she heard his footsteps and looked up. He stopped a few feet away. He looked for once, like a man who did not know what to say. She waited. "I was wrong," he said finally. "Not because of the title, or the crown, or what you have become. I was wrong about what you were worth, 3 years ago. I convinced myself I had good reasons. I did not. I was afraid, and I chose the safe thing, and I have had to live with that every day since." Seraphina was quiet for a moment. The lantern light moved softly across the stone. "You looked at me," she said, "and decided I was too small for your future. That is what the rejection meant, not just the words, the decision behind them." "Yes," he said. "And you were wrong." "Yes." She looked at him steadily. "I am not the same person you left at the edge of that forest. I do not need you to complete anything in my life. I built something whole without you, and I intend to keep it whole." She paused. "So if you are standing here because you feel guilty, I do not need your guilt. And if you are standing here because you still feel the bond, then you should understand that the bond is not a reason by itself. It is a beginning, nothing more. What comes after the beginning depends entirely on who the people are." He was quiet for a long moment. "I know," he said. "I am not asking you to forget what I did, or to pretend 3 years did not happen. I am asking if there is any possibility that you might be willing to see what we could be now, as the people we are now. I would like to try, honestly, without agenda." Seraphina considered him. She had imagined, in some quiet corner of her mind, the version of this conversation where she felt nothing, where 3 years of becoming herself had sealed the wound so completely that his words landed without making any mark. She had hoped for that version. It was not this version. The bond was still there, quieter than it once was, but present, like an ember that had survived a long winter, and was now, in the warmth of proximity, beginning to glow again. She could not pretend otherwise. She was many things now, but she was not dishonest. "I will not give you an answer tonight," she said. "You have a Luna. You have a pack. Those are real things, and they need to be handled with honesty and care, not swept aside. If there is a path forward, it must be walked properly, by everyone involved." She stood. "What I will tell you is this. I am not closed. I spent a long time being angry, and then I spent a long time building something better than anger. I am not going to throw away either of those things for a quick answer in a garden." She picked up her documents and turned to leave. Then she stopped. "You were right about one thing," she said, without turning around. "I do deserve someone whose world is smaller than yours." She looked back at him over her shoulder, and for a moment, she let him see her clearly. Not the high Luna, not the crown, not the authority, just Seraphina, steady and unbroken. "Fortunately," she said, "my world is much larger than it used to be." She walked back toward the lantern-lit doorway of the estate, and she did not look back a second time. Mach. The boundary accords were signed 2 days later. Every Alpha present put their mark on the documents, and Serafina pressed the covenant seal beside them with the quiet certainty of someone who had spent 3 years earning the right to do exactly this. She returned to the covenant sanctuary with Elder Marin at the end of the week. The old woman did not ask what had happened in the garden. She simply looked at Serafina's face and nodded slightly, the way she did when she had seen something she expected. "Well?" she said finally, when they had been home 3 days. "Well," Serafina said. He asked. And I told him the truth. And I am not in a hurry." Marin smiled at that, a small, warm smile. "That," she said, "is how you know you have actually healed." A letter arrived from Caden 4 weeks later. It was short, no grand promises, nothing designed to impress. He wrote that he had been honest with Isolde, that she had handled the truth with a grace he deeply respected, and that they were navigating their situation with care. He wrote that he was not asking Serafina to wait. He was simply asking, when the time was right and if she was willing, whether she might consider meeting, not as Alpha and High Luna, but as two people who had been given a second chance by something older and wiser than either of them. Serafina read the letter twice. She set it on her desk and looked out at the pine trees beyond the Covenant stone walls, where the morning light was coming through in long golden lines. Then she picked up a quill and wrote 3 words. "I'll be there." She sealed the letter and handed it to the messenger. Then she went back to her work, and the morning was quiet, and the light through the trees was very beautiful, and she felt, for the first time in a long time, that the future was something she was genuinely curious about. The moon goddess, it seemed, had always known what she was doing. She had simply needed her children to catch up.